Hello everyone and welcome to Wally Mods, and welcome back to my Factorio modding tutorial series. In this episode we're going to be going over configuration settings so that the users can have a little bit more of a say in how they want to utilize your mod. I hope you're all enjoying this series so far, so let's just get right into this video. As it says in the overview, each mod can specify settings that users can change, and we can give them, as mod creators, access to a little bit of tweaking to our mod. As discussed in the first video of this series, there are 3 different stages. For our configuration files, they're defined in the settings stage. If you don't remember exactly how that works, go back to my first video, and then come back here and we'll get ready to go. Defining your own setting is much like defining a prototype, which I discussed a couple videos back. You create a table in Lua which has a set of attributes which define your setting. In this basic one here, which you can see I modeled to the right, you have a type of your setting, a name, a setting type, and a default value. There are other properties that you can implement as well, such as you can have a localized name and a localized description, and I'll be going over those in a little bit later. For the type property, you have 4 different options. You can have a Boolean setting, an integer, a double, and a string. Now these follow as they read. For the Boolean, you can have a value which is either true or false. An int, you can have integer value. A double, double, string, string. Inside these integer settings, you can have minimum values and maximum values, or you can have an array of allowed values. These 3 are all optional, but there must be a default value which the setting automatically goes to. Similarly, this follows in the double setting with the minimum, maximum, and allowed values. And next we have a string setting. We can have a default value, or we could just allow players to keep it blank, or we can have an array of strings much like the double and integer settings. As a mod creator, you could allow the player to define a string setting so that they can add names to certain objects in your mod, or it could add personability for each player. The next thing we're going to discuss is the setting type property. There are only 3 of these for all settings. You could have a startup property, and this is only available in the prototype stage, but cannot be changed during runtime. They have to be set to the same values for all players on the server, and they can't be customized for each player on a single server. Next we have a runtime global. It is global to an entire saved game, but can be changed during runtime. And on servers, only admins can change this setting. The next is a runtime per user, which you can see I used to the right here. This setting is only available during runtime, or the control.lua stage, and it's individualized for each player in the save server game. When a player joins, it basically says keep this mod setting per save, and determines if the local settings are already set and if they're synced to what the server thinks it is. Before going any further, I'll just explain what our test mod today will be doing. We can see I created a table. I'm going to have a Boolean, so a true or false value. And I'm just going to name it YouTube mod has placed entity. And basically this is going to keep track if a player on my server or utilizing this mod has ever placed an entity before. I have a default value to false because as soon as the player loads in, they will not have placed an entity before. One thing you could also do is move this whole table into a local variable and then just say data extend so on and so forth, including your local variable, so that you don't have a long list of tables in this one data colon extend. Now that we have our mod, I want to change it so that when the player sees the graphical user interface in game, it tells us a little bit about the mod. So if I head back to the locale file from our last video, I'm going to add a new heading called mod setting name. I'm going to use our mod setting that I just defined in the settings.lua file. I'm going to say our name for this mod setting is hasPlacedEntity as such. Next, I'm going to add, you have a heading for mod setting description. Follows similarly as locale files from the last video. And this is pretty much all it says in this left window. Now that we've technically created our setting, let's see what it looks like in game so far. Alright, now that I have Factorio loaded up, if you go into your settings, mod settings, and we should be able to see that our per player category has popped up with a hasPlacedEntity checkbox, a false or true value. You can see it's under our mod name, modding with YouTube, and when we hover over it, it gives our description that we defined in the locale file before. However, this mod doesn't really do much at all, and we haven't made it interactable within our data phase. Our control phase, rather. So let's do that. Okay, now that we're in our control.lua file, I'm going to, in our previously defined entity placed function, all I have to do is set the settings value to true whenever it's placed. To do that, we can look under the documentation online, and we can see down here that we access it with the settings dictionary. If we go over to the Lua settings to look further into it, we can see that there's 3 different custom dictionaries that we can utilize: Startup, Global, and Player. These 3 match up with the setting type that we defined right here. And since we're doing one per user, you can see that we would be using the Player custom dictionary. So what we want to do is access it through settings.player, and then we would have our mod setting name, and we want to see that set the value equal to true. Now whenever a player places an entity, it should be setting our setting to a true value. Let's go check it out and see if it worked. Before we load up Factorio, actually, let's give some feedback to us in-game to see if the setting was correctly set. The way we can do that is by printing out our current setting dot value. Alright, now let's load up the game. Alright, now we have a new game open. I'm going to make a container, because that's the only way our function that we defined will work. And when we place this chest, we should be getting true, which means that our setting was set to true. Alright, this is awesome. Now we can give users a way to interact with your mod and give them a little bit of personability whenever utilizing your mod, which is always a plus. For a perhaps better idea to see on how you could use settings in your mod, you can see over here in the documentation, they're using it to set stack sizes for items. Now what you might want to do is have different levels of difficulty for your mod, and you could use this to modify stack sizes so that it might be more difficult for players to get enough resources to sustain their factory. And they actually do this down here, is they make a setting, which is a bool setting, so a true or false, or rather a string setting, which is the mod is always difficult. And then down here in the control.lua file, they're going to read in to see if their mod is always difficult, and if it's a yes, then they will modify difficulty settings as they please. Or you could do it per event linkage that we discussed in another video. Alright everyone, thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to get more updates on releasings of videos like these, you can follow my Twitter at modswally. If you're enjoying the series so far, consider subscribing so that you can see more content like this in the future and more modding down the line. I also am putting all of my code that I utilize in these videos in my GitHub, which I will link in the description below. That's all I have for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.